Hi everyone, and welcome to the second part of our tutorial series TyFLOW for ArchViz. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how we can use TyFLOW's physics-based simulation and create some new assets. So let's go just into 3ds Max, and I'm going to use some assets from the Chaos Cosmos library, and I'm going to start with this mix of fruits and drag it into my scene. So let me just bring it a little bit closer here. Come on. So let's go to show whole mesh, edit poly, and then just collapse it. Now, in order to work with TyFLOW and these objects, we have to prepare them. We have to separate them first. So let's go and do that. Let's go and select this guy and detach it. Call it plum. That is a red apple, has a stem. It's wrong. So let me detach that one. Apple, red. Then we have it green apple. So detach this one. Apple green. Then we have a pear. So I'm going to do this, and that peach. Detach this one as well. So everything detached. We need the plate. And there we go. Now I can go actually and delete the original model. Don't need it anymore. And select all my fruit and send them to a new layer. Call that element fruit. So now I'm going to select all of them, go to hierarchy, affect pivot only, and center them. Then go to utilities, reset xform, reset selected, and then right click, convert to editable poly. So now I can move them aside and go back to my default layer, create a TyFLOW object, and I'm gonna align it with my plate so I see where it is. Then we can go to the settings, and here we change the time step to 1/4, and then open the editor. So now we have to give birth to some particles that we can turn to these meshes. For this we're gonna use the birth operator. Set the end time to 50, means it should generate all the particles within 50 frames, and we don't need 20 particles, we need some around 15 or something. Then we need an icon in order to tell TyFLOW where to generate the particles from, and we don't have any in our scene, so we create a new one, and this one I'm going to align with this plate as well. So now I can move that up and then change the shape of it to circle, and maybe bring it down to 20 so it's not bigger as my plate. Then we need a shape operator, so we can use our fruits as our shapes, and we can remove what is in here. Go to the fruits, select them all, and then add selected. We go and move the CTR. You see all these fruits are getting generated, but they are sitting on top of this icon. So we have to change them to physical shapes, and we go and use physics shapes for it. And this will make them physical based shapes, and they will use the built-in gravity and the collision, so which is in this rollout when we go to physics. So you see default gravity and the default ground collider are activated. So this is what is using, and this is why those things are just falling right away. So we need a collision object now to stop them from falling down the table and the plate. So we go and pick our plate as our collider object and also the table. So when we move it now, they're going to collide with that. But as you can see, they don't fall into the plate. They're just sitting on top of this plate. This is because the hull is set to convex. And when I turn it on, you can see this hole here, and that thing is what these particles are colliding with. And you can't see that very well now, but this convex hull is closing the gap on the top, and this is why these guys aren't falling into the plate. So in order to fix that, we have to go and change it to mesh, and then everything goes and takes the shape of our mesh, and then they can really collide with the real thing and not just with the hole that is closing everything around it. So now let's bring that back in, and that is fixed now. And there we have it. So now they are falling, and they are falling off the table and off the plate and everything. We can slow it down a little bit by using the slow operator here. So let me set it in there. Maybe 15 is just too much. Gonna set it to 12 for now. So it looks better. Now we don't see what the arrangement really is because we don't have the materials. So I can select one apple here, go to my material editor, and then remove everything in here. Go to material, get from selected. That gives me the complete materials that are used for all of them because they are using that multi-sub object. And select this and select TyFLOW, right click and assign that to your TyFLOW. So those things are getting the materials back. Now here we can go to our shape operator and then change the frequency for each particle. So let's say the green apples shouldn't be the 100. Maybe we just need 50% green apples. Then the red apples could be 60. Peach could be maybe 20. Pear could be 15. And now we have a good mix of them. So we can maybe increase that again. And this looks now better than before. So we don't have everything falling off and etc. So what I would like to add into here is rotation. So they're not falling all in the same direction. And then we have some diversity in each of them. And let me go and try to increase that to maybe 17. And that is now working very well. So now if I'm not happy with the fruit mix, I can go to the shape and then change the seed. So that gives me another arrangement, another mix of the fruits. But if you're happy with what you see as the amount of the fruits and stuff, but the arrangement is something you don't like, you can go to rotation and then change that seed. So it will not change what you have on your plate, but it will change how it is arranged. So this way you can go and just generate different things. Then once you're happy with the results, don't forget to move your CTI to the very, very last frame. So everything is really settled and the animation is, or simulation is finished. So nothing is hanging in the air and stuff. And now let's say we are happy with that result and we would like to freeze this as our setup or our fruit sets. So for this, we can add a mesh operator, which is pretty important, by the way, if you are going to render stuff done with TyFLOW and your TyFLOW is just like this, activated. So you just go and render it like that. If you don't use mesh, you won't see your stuff in your render. So if you're missing the stuff in your render, this is most of the time the case that it is forgotten. So just add it and you're good to go. But in this case, I'm not going to use it for rendering. I'm going to use it for freezing stuff. Before I'm going to freeze that, I go and duplicate my TyFLOW as a copy. Say OK. And now it gives me that tabs up here. So I have TyFLOW 1 and TyFLOW 2. I'm going to deactivate my TyFLOW 2, go to TyFLOW 1 and select it here in my layers, and make sure that my mesh not having the render only checkbox checked. So you have to uncheck that thing. And now with TyFLOW selected, go to edit poly, right click, and then go to collapse to. Now we collapsed that setup that we have created with TyFLOW, and we can call that fruits A, for example, and then we can go and duplicate this plate and call that plate A as well. Now we can go and select both of them and send them to a new layer and call that set A, for example. So now I can go and select my fruits and then link them to this table, to this plate, and then select them again and go to center pivot and align it to my world. So there we go. Now when we move this guy, we are having a new set of fruits. Now we can go back to our TyFLOW number 2, open the editor, let it run, and turn on the plate again. So right now we have the same setup, but we can go to the rotation and change this. And that will give us a new arrangement. It looks different than the first one that we did. And then we can put that aside as our second set of fruits. So let's say in this one, I actually don't want to have any red apples. So I'm going to remove this. So I have more of peach and green apples here. So I can go now and change the rotation until I am happy with how they are sitting in that plate. Maybe I just bring it down to 15. One is just always going off the plate. So, and then I'm calling that good. So edit poly, right click, collapse to, and then we can go and link it to the plate. Call it fruits B, that is plate B, and now we can go and set it to a new layer. So set B. There we go. This is our second item. We can just put it aside. Now we don't need these fruits anymore. So I can go back to my elements and delete those and delete this layer as well. So we just created two different plates out of one single item from the library. That is one way we can rearrange assets and make them unique and different as what we have in these libraries all the time. Because in my opinion, using these over and over and over again becomes one day boring to you and maybe to your clients when they are seeing always the same thing in each project you are creating. We can also mix stuff. We can bring in this guy maybe, that cocktail maybe. So Let me move them here and then set this guy to whole mesh, edit poly, right click and then collapse to. Let's call it bowl, and then we go and change this to show whole mesh, edit poly, right click and then collapse to. So what I would like to do is adding these cherries into this bowl. So for this we have to get rid of the stuff we don't need, such as the glass and the liquid and all the things. So I don't need the strawberries. So delete everything so we are left with these cherries only. So I'm going to select the first one and go and detach these and call it cherry 001. Then I'm going to go and select this guy and this guy, detach these as cherry 002, and then select these four and detach them as cherry 003. So again, get rid of the original. Now we have to select them all, go to hierarchy, effect pivot only, center, go to utilities, reset xform, reset selected, right click, convert to editable poly. So now send them to a new layer and call it cherries. Now let's go and create another TyFLOW. Go and align it with my bowl and set the time steps to 1/4. Open the editor and we're gonna go and do the same thing. So give birth to some particles, position icon. We can actually use this guy. We don't need to create a new one. So just pick that and then align it to this bowl. Make sure it is not bigger than our container. Bring it up here. So now we need a shape operator again. Remove what is in here. Select the cherries. Add selected. And then we have to turn them to physical shapes. So physics shapes. Change it from convex to compound. That will go and again respect the shapes of our object here and make sure you are using grid slice convex holes. Then we go to physical collision or physics collision, and then add our bowl and table to it and change the hull type to mesh. And last thing we need is a mesh operator, and we have to change the display to geometry. Now select one of these cherries, go to material editor, again delete everything in here, go to material, get from selected, select the multi-sub object material, select TyFLOW and assign it to your TyFLOW object. So now when we move it, it will just generate some cherries and drop them into a bowl. Now we have to change the time because otherwise it will just generate it to the end. I'm going to set it to 100 and let that amount be and see what happens. So I guess 200 is just too much. Let's go to 120. And again, I will add a rotation operator to it so that they are not falling all in the same direction. Just drop it in here and let it on random 3D. So each one is turned to another angle. And there we have it. Now we have a bowl full of cherries. We can go here again, uncheck render only, edit poly, right click, collapse to, and then cherries, link them to this bowl, and now we can select both, send it to a new layer, cherry bowl. There we go. Now we don't need these guys, so we can get rid of them. And this is our next item that we just created. So, and you can use that method for all sorts of things. So you can really go and take these breads and put them in here. Let's just do that actually. Let's bring that in here. Bring this bread. So then let me change this again to show whole object, edit poly, and then right click and collapse to. And here I'm going to select this plate, the wooden plate here, and delete everything else. Call it wooden plate. Then we have these bread here. I'm pretty sure they're all the same. So let me go and see if that is true. So right click and collapse to. Yeah, it looks all the same. I don't know, maybe they're different, but it looks like they're the same. But let's go and separate them. So then go and detach red 1. Now there we have them. Now we can go and select them, move them to a new layer, bring out that plate, select them all, and go and center the pivot point and align it to the world. Reset X form, reset selected, right click, and convert to editable poly. So now we can go back to our TyFLOW and create new TyFLOW object here. Go and align it with my plate and align this guy with it, but not on the z-axis, just x and y. And again, we go to TyFLOW editor, change the time steps here to 1/4, and create a new bird object. Sorry, bird operator. Send that to 75 maybe. These guys are 6. I'm gonna add a shape operator. Then select all the breads. Add selected, remove this triangle. Add Physx shape, Physx collision. Select my plate. And then select my table. Set the whole to mesh. We also need position icon. We're gonna pick this guy, and we change the display to geometry. Select one of these breads, go to material editor, delete all the materials, material get from selected, select this one, and TyFLOW assign the material to it. and let it run and see what we get so far. So now again we need rotation because they're all falling in the same direction. And there we have it. So now we can change the rotation speed, and that is it. So now I can go to the mesh operator again, uncheck render only, so it will turn them to meshes in your viewport, edit poly, right click, collapse to, and then we have that right here. So link them to this plate. Then we can go and select that, delete all of those guys, and we are done with our plate with braids on it. So the other method using the physics is letting TyFLOW separating the stuff that we have in our object. Let me bring that in, for example. Go again to the preview type here and change it to show whole mesh, edit poly, right click, and then collapse to. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit and give it some rotation like this. Then I'm going to create a TyFLOW object and set the time step to 1/4 again, open the editor, and here I'm not going to use the usual birth operator that we were using all the time. I'm going to use the birth objects operator because I just wanna go and give birth to this specific object. Now before I do so, I'm selecting it and then go to material editor again, go to material, get from selected, select TyFLOW and assign this material to it. So just that we are doing it just already. Here we can go and pick our object, and then we can go and turn it to physics shapes again. Now it is gone because it is colliding with nothing. So we need a physics collision and select the table as our collision object and set the hull type to mesh. So when we go move this now, it will just land on the table and nothing else happens. So something that we can use, that we could do without using TyFLOW. But here's a special thing. If you go to the birth object, you see split object elements. If you turn that on, everything explodes here. So now to fix that, we have to go back to the physics shapes and change that whole mode from convex to compound, and then from voxels to grid slice. So now it will go and again use the mesh as its whole. So it is really taking the shape of our meshes, and that fixes that explosion. So we don't have to display this guy. But when I go and then simulate now, look what happens. There you go. Everything is separated, everything is physically correct and really accurate. And we have just a mix of some peanuts on our table and some of them nicely put in into that bowl. And this is a freaking fantastic feature. Now when you're done here, again, go to mesh, uncheck render only, edit poly, right click, collapse to, and then call that peanuts. There we go. Now we can go and center it and then move it along. You also can go and change the placement of these guys afterwards. So you can still go and select each one of them, bring them closer, but they are now sitting correctly on your table, and it looks pretty cool. We also can go and use it to just arrange stuff on top of each other. For example, let's say we have this bowl and we do want to have a couple of them to put it on a shelf or something. So, and you don't want to go and, align each and single one manually. So we can go and use an array modifier and then give it some amount in the z-axis, so as many as you want. Then go to the local rotation, set that to incremental, and then change slightly the direction on each axis. So something like this maybe. Just be sure that they are not going intersect here, so that is now too much. Just go into each other too strong, so something like that. Then bring it up a little bit, and then again TyFLOW, go to the modifier and go to steps, change it to 1/4, open this, and then again we go and use bird objects. Select that, go to material editor, remove all the materials, go to material, get from selected, select your TyFLOW and assign the material to it. Then here we go and say we want to change it to physics shapes. We want them to be compound and get their own mesh hole and physics collision. Gonna pick the table, set that to mesh, and then the mesh operator. So we move that right now. No, I forgot to pick it actually. Sorry. So we move it right now, they're just falling here and nothing happens. But when we activate split object elements, that will just put them all together, and there we have it. So go to mesh, uncheck render only, edit poly, right click, and then collapse to. So these are bowls, red and black. So hierarchy, and then center it, maybe bring it to the bottom, and there you go. So that is another way you can use the physics or physics-based particles in TyFLOW to create assets like that. So we don't need the physics-based particles in all cases, and in some cases it is actually pretty dangerous to use it, because if you go to deal with a huge amount of particles, things can change. For that, there is another solution. Let's go and make an example of what I mean. So let's bring in this candy jar, and then we have maybe some empty jars somewhere. Oh yeah, there we go. So put them in here. Then let me go back to the modifier and then see. So show the whole mesh, edit poly, and then right click, collapse to. I don't need that giant jar here. let me see, what is this? Okay, that's that guy. Let me go and select that and delete it, and select that small one and delete that as well. So let me go and center the pivot point for this one and set it to the bottom. So there we go. Now I go and detach the cap. So we don't need that now, so we can put it back on when we're finished. So there we go. Get rid of this guy, and this is the jaw itself. And then we need this guy. And I'm gonna change that to show whole mesh, edit poly, right click and collapse to. Then what I need is just a single bone here, a bean or whatever that is, a candy or something. I'm gonna detach and call that bean, and then remove this. Select that single bean and go and center its pivot point and reset it X-form, right click and convert to editable poly. So that is our bean. This guy is my Ty icon. I'm gonna align it with this jar and make it a little bit bigger. And now we can go and create our TyFLOW. Open the editor, and here we use the birth operator again. So we go give birth, and then we say we have the position icon that we're going to use, and we're going to pick this guy that we already have. Then we need the shape operator, put it in here, and then go and select this bean, add selected, and delete that triangle. And we're going to go and add rotation operator in here. And since we are not using the Physx-based particles, we need to add a force operator and set the gravity to -1 or -0.2. And also we have to use the collider or collision operator. So we're going to pick that jar and set that to shape radius. And that is also true for our table, just in case. So now let me go and display geometry, and then go to material editor, delete everything here, and then get from selected. This gives me also the glass material. We don't need that. So I'm going to delete this guy and assign my candy or bean materials to my TyFLOW. Now I let that go. This is what we get. So right now we have just 200 particles, which is not enough to fill up this jar. But before we go and increase this, we go and see what happens. So here you see that things aren't colliding with each other, so they are all intersecting. So this is because they are not physics shapes, and in order to fake that effect with the physics on these particles, we can use the particle physics operator. So if I go and add it into this, they will have their own physical hull around them, a sphere actually, and then that is what is pushing them away from each other. So we go to shape here and set that to center pivots, which is pretty important. So you have the collision sphere really around the entire mesh, and we can go and actually increase the size of it to 1.2 or something. So they are slightly bigger than those beans themselves. So that gives them a little bit of a collision and they are not going into each other. That helps a lot. But that is still rendering or calculating the simulation much faster, even we would go and deal with a higher amount of particles, which we will do right now. So now we have 200. Let's go to 6,000 and then let that go. We have to shorten the time here. Set it to 100. And we also should go and change that to 1/4 so we have more accurate results and they're not jiggling. So that explosion that you see here is because we have the physics particles and they are just interacting with each other just right away and that made them explode. So we could fix it with ignore binding and neighbors, but in this case that will not help a lot. What helped to fix that better is the slow operator. So when I add a slow operator in here and put that maybe to 15, that slows them down and they do not explode as crazy as they did before. And the next thing I have to change is just the diameter of my icon. But or we can go and set this to pivot so they are not coming from everywhere but just the center, and that will help to have that explosion under control. But now we are emitting, what is it, 6,000 particles in nearly no time. And since that will be nothing that is using a high accuracy or physical accuracy, so that will work pretty well for these cases. So you don't need to turn them to physical shapes. You can do it just this way. And now again, when we are finished, we can go to mesh operator, uncheck render only, and then select our TyFLOW, add editable poly, right click, collapse to, and then call that beans, and center the pivot point. So now we can bring back the cap. So we can select the cap and the beans and then go and link them to our jar. So move that away. So everything is good. And this bean can go away as well. So that is how we can fill jars and stuff pretty quickly with TyFLOW. And this is it for this tutorial. I hope that these techniques are helpful and useful to you in order to create your unique stuff and not being forced to use the given or available stuff in all these libraries over and over again. I wish you a good time and we'll see you in the third part of our tutorial series TyFLOW for ArchViz. Have a good one and see you soon. Bye bye.